Welcome to a new episode of Indaba, the African Debate. I am Mdudu Zubran, and thank you very much for joining me today. Again, a different episode this week. I've got a friend of mine who will be joining me, and we'll be basically talking about why I started the channel and my inspirations, I guess. I don't know. I guess it is a Q&A. Yeah, it's a Q&A. Damn. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Indaba.
It's so new today.
With a little bit of a twist today, I guess, a little bit of a twist on this occasion. So I'm William Messenger. I'm going to be, I guess, steering us through today's episode. And of course, you know Brian. He seems to have had a half decent haircut this time around, thank God. Still in lockdown though. Listen, I'm not going to say anything about a hairline. Mine left me a long time ago, so it is what it is. Yeah, let's get started. Let's get going. My first question is, what prompted you to want to run this particular program? I mean, what set you on this Indaba journey? What kicked it off?
Yeah, I think I've had this. I've been sitting on this idea for about 4 years. My initial idea was a blog, just write things, anything about Africa. I felt there was always a space for us to talk deeply about Africa, whether it's positive or negative. That's never the issue for me. The issue for me was just talk about it, because when you talk about it, then you inspire somebody else to come up with a solution to something. And I guess to a certain extent, I was tired of having only one narrative of what Africa is, and the narrative always coming from one source. Of course, that was 4 years ago, and that has obviously changed over the past few years, and Africans are now coming out more and telling their story for themselves. So I then decided the best way is start something that will challenge how we view Africa. Whether you're in Africa, whether you are in Europe, whether you're in the United States, Australia, it doesn't matter. The idea now was just to change and challenge how you view Africa. So that was the initial idea, really. Just get people thinking, get people talking. Like I said, it's not about the negative or positive aspect. We sometimes tend to say, oh, too much negative is happening, let's focus on the positive. But we've got to focus on that negative as well, so as to come up with solutions. I think more often than not, we're not coming up with the right solutions. That's why we're still having the same problems.
Interesting. So you said you were talking about trying to change how Africa is viewed, I guess, as a whole. And I guess that leads me to a question. Do you think that Africa is being viewed in the wrong, or has been viewed in the wrong light for a long time? Do you think that there are very specific aspects of Africa that are seen incorrectly, shall we say, or that are portrayed in a light that is unjust?
100%. Even a simple basic thing of most people treat in Africa as if it's a country. I know I generalize most of the time in the program and say Africa, but it's not because I believe Africa is a country. Africa is a continent. But one thing I do believe is that we face the same challenges on the surface. We face the same challenges, whether social or economic. They are more or less similar. And I also believe that we share a lot in common. That's on the surface. But when you come down to the second layer, which I think is a deep aspect of things, it becomes very country specific in that aspect. I think there's a lot about Africa that has, not been portrayed correctly. I don't even know where to begin. That's how bad it is in my perspective. But like I said, even a small thing such as people referring to Africa as just a country, yet it's such a diverse continent with thousands of different languages, hundreds of thousands of different cultures.
I know you said we've chosen to look specifically at Africa, and it's many different colors, and it's many different dialects, and different cultures that are happily encapsulated within that wonderful continent. But I guess my question from this is, why just Africa, if you see what I mean. I mean, the globe is a wonderful place, and there are many things that happen in continents and in countries that are outside of Africa that may directly impact Africa, or could be a cascade that leads down to Africa that really impacts the people of that continent, the people of the different countries within it. Why have you chosen not to at least have a glance at one of the things that's happening somewhere else that might then trickle down and have had an impact or is having an impact?
The world is too big, first things first. It's too big. But I think it's because, again, it's to challenge people's narratives of Africa. Some people, unfortunately, the only narrative they have of Africa was an image from 1992 in Ethiopia or Sudan. They've had their problems, but equally they've had their own success stories of how, for example, there's a serious fintech business happening right now in the middle of Mogadishu somewhere, right? Most people don't think about that. They only just think, oh, it's just conflict, it's just hunger.
So, I mean, of the episodes and of the topics that you've touched thus far, I think we've included, there was a good discussion on economics. I think that you had, it was very good, very interesting. And I think there was another very healthy one that happened, and I was quite intrigued by that one on literature, African literature. I think that was definitely very interesting. I guess my question is, what are your ideas for your next general area? I mean, there's so many wonderful things to touch on, but do you have a particular thought on where what topics you might be reaching out to discuss next?
Yeah,
that your viewers might be interested in.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest passions is education in Africa. I definitely want to look at that, how the African education system is set up, ranging from how different the Southern African system is, East African system is, and how we can then improve that education system so that it instills more of African philosophy, African, literature. Because one of my biggest joys is reading philosophy, but one thing that's lacking in the philosophy space is a lot of literature around African philosophers, for example. Yet we know African philosophy in general is very rich and very diverse and very different. So things like that, how can we improve on education in general around Africa, and getting a lot of kids to read more African literature, more African philosophers, more African politics? Because 99% of the time, most curriculums in Africa, you are reading about the Chinese, you're reading about the Americans, you're reading about the European wars, Russian wars. Honestly, that is not useful to the African child. It doesn't benefit the African child at all. But once I, as a young man in Southern Africa, learn about what's happening in Cameroon, that might hopefully ignite a spark, of how we can go through a process where we don't repeat those same mistakes, or we celebrate those good things that have happened in Cameroon.
That's a good point. And I think definitely worth noting, I've definitely seen that it's a lot easier to see and observe important culture, or information, and definitely philosophy from outside of Africa. We see that a lot. But when it comes to exporting African philosophy, or even just understanding it and grasping it ourselves, it's not really a big thing that happens. It's almost seen that you have a better understanding of culture if you understand it from outside of yourself rather than understanding your own, which is
precisely like most people right now. You can go almost anywhere in Africa and ask them about random European philosophers. They will tell you. If you go to a university in the philosophy faculty, ask them about 2 African philosophers. No one will tell you, right? Ask them about literature, African literature. People will struggle to come up with a lot of different diverse African books, African literature genres, you name it. But they'll be the first to tell you about Charles Dickens. They'll be first to tell you about William Shakespeare and all his 150 plays, and how play number 5, this is what happened, but would struggle to tell you about the next door neighbor that wrote a book 20 years ago, and that book became a success, but success within its own right, but it was never celebrated.
Yeah, you spoke quickly about also importing China's own impacts. You know, that's always good. I mean, leading on from that, what are your thoughts on the current influence and impact that China's having? I mean, we see it across the globe, you know, quite I want to say forcefully, but it's definitely grown. And like I said, specifically within Africa, it's you know, quite visible. What are your thoughts on the influence that China is currently having within Africa?
Yeah, we've got an issue on our hands. Basically, when you go back into recent African history, in general, when all of these countries got independence, a war of some sort was fought. And when this war was fought, the countries that helped most African countries were Russia and China. So there was a time, the time had to come where China and Russia had to come back and say, guys, for all those things we did for you, can you pay us back somehow? This is where the problem came. China's been very influential because China helped a lot during the liberation struggles of a lot of countries. China planted a seed and just waited for it to grow. And now they're just coming to reap. And that's
so you
it.
don't feel that their not say their impact, but their assistance was not in an altruistic manner. It was with something in sight, shall we say, as a plan.
They had their motive. And I think all the aid and the help that we received back then to get to get through the liberation struggle, we had to pay it back somehow. And this is why you find that there's no strong condemnation of what Africa is doing in China, what China is doing in Africa by most of the leaders, purely because they know they have a debt to pay. And this debt creeps up every so often because any African country that gets into a bit of trouble, China just goes, can we help you? And as soon as you accept that help, again, more seeds being planted to be to get the rewards later on. So I think Russia is involved as well. The thing about Russia, they're very quiet and calm about it, but they are involved as well in the scramble for the new scramble for Africa.
It's interesting. I mean, speaking of debt, you know, I mean, at present, China's one of the I want to say but one of the countries that are willing to offer loans out to, you know, African countries, and they're usually used to help build infrastructure, which is a good thing, and we're always happy to see, you know, developing countries with wonderful brand new roads. But the obvious side effect to that is that these loans are leading to, you know, huge racks up in debt that we're seeing within these countries as well. How, I mean, is there a better way to try and create this infrastructure? I mean, at present, there are a lot of countries within Africa that have, shall we say, there are a lot of countries, like you said, it's rich in minerals, and there are a lot of countries within Africa that have decided to privatize their mines. And now we have these privatized mines also taken up by a lot of Chinese corporations. It seems that many of these countries kind of shot themselves in the foot and then go on and put themselves into further debt. Is there any potential way out of this? I mean, is the best move to try and take back these privatized mines? Can they do that kind of thing? I mean, is that
the problem that we've had since 1600 or 1500, you name it, in Africa, was a serious, huge skills drain. And that happened throughout colonization, that happened throughout just after independence, because a lot of people left because of poor governance, and that's still happening to today. All the leaders we have at the moment, most of them are from liberation parties. And the main concern is trying to pay off their debts. And when I mean debt, I don't mean necessarily in monetary terms, but trying to pay off their debts to everybody. They've got to pay the debt to Russia, China, United Kingdom, a bit to USA as well, because, you know, of all the conditions that were tied down to that independence happening. So their focus is never really on good governance for the African, but it's more on how can I please the people that I owe this debt to? How can I make things happen for them? And as a result, we don't upskill a lot of Africans because there's so much talent, raw talent in Africa that just needs to be upskilled to say, okay, cool, this is what you have. Let's give you the resources. Let's give you extra this. And the guys that left, come back, help these guys. And all of a sudden, you've got this level playing field. You've got the economy coming up. You don't need to borrow as much. Because right now we're borrowing a lot because for some strange reason, we don't believe in our own human capital. We believe everything needs to come from outside, yet we ship a lot outside as well. It's a very bizarre situation that right now to build a bridge, you would want to bring a company based in Finland.
Well, let me catch you on that very topic there, actually. I mean, even with still on the China issue, I mean, there's a lot of influx of, so we say, cheap Chinese products that I guess are hindering manufacturers within these countries, and it's very difficult to compete with, you know, with somebody that can bring things in or bars of soap for a quarter of the price that it will take you to make the same thing. How do we fight? I say fight against, but how do we compete? How can some, you know, Babatunde down the road compete with you know, somebody else that's importing their things?
Yeah, I think this is a struggle that's worldwide, not necessarily just only in Africa. But I think where the flip side that works better in Africa is that we got the human capital to actually try and compete with them in comparison to most Western economies. With every African problem, it goes back to governance. We need a system of governance that would put the African jobs first, the Africans first. Because right now we speak of the Chinese. When the Chinese do come over to build that bridge, they bring Chinese workers. They also drag along a little Chinese restaurant with them. So everything that they do and all the money that they get recycles within the Chinese community and ends up back in China rather than circulating within the African economy. And what we need to do again is going back to that point of skilling our own laborers. At the moment, we've got a lot of unemployed youth. And some of them are happy to take up these jobs. Some are happy to start off their own enterprises. And as such, they should be encouraged. And the only way we can combat anything coming from outside is down to good governance that will bring good policies that can only benefit the African.
And I guess one final question from me, Brian, and I think this is probably the one I'm most interested about, if I'm honest. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Lobola? Do you think it still has a place in this day and age? Is it still appropriate? Does it help? Does it hinder? Should it just be kicked out?
Listening to the interview of Chief Ndiweni, where he spoke about what Lobola was within the Ndebele community from the get-go, and in general across Southern Africa, was that Lobola was seen as a social security, the first African way of social security. So if I am getting married and I come and give 5 cows to the family, what then was done was that those cows were kept. So that if in an event where I've got a family, my family is going through tough times, they're hungry, we can always go and get milk from there because there's cows there. We can always go and slaughter a cow because there's food. He then talks about how then that adapted to a slightly modern way of saying, okay, you can pay the Lobola, we'll then take X amount of these funds to fund your wedding. The problem that we're having with Lobola now is that it's become a money-making scheme. It's become a very big come-up, so to speak, for some families. but there is more than just the payment of the cows involved. There's the part that brings families together. So there's certainly good aspects that definitely need to be kept. It's the payment part that people need to sit down and think deeply about. It just doesn't make sense for me that a family would demand a Range Rover and $10,000 on top. What's going on? How do you expect these people to start their lifestyle? More so in the Western aspect, in this urban lifestyle I keep talking about, that's coming up in Africa, where people are also trying to build their lives. They're trying to get a mortgage. They're trying to pay school fees. They're trying to pay tax. They're trying to do this and that. They're trying to look after their grandmothers and grandfathers. And then you come and demand $10,000, which could be the difference between having a mortgage and not. So I think the traditional aspect of bringing family together, one or two rituals that some cultures have to be kept. And that, I think, is important to go through. I just think the monetary aspect needs a serious look into, because it was never about money. Even if you fast forward it and say it's a token of appreciation, as some people say it is, a token of appreciation doesn't mean I have to fund your whole lifestyle. Because technically you don't stop paying for lobola. You pay lobola for the rest of your life. By way, even if you're visiting, you bring groceries. If you're doing this and that, you bring groceries or whatever it is, you know, it's a way of seen as part of the lobola payment. I'm just against people making it a come up, but I think the traditional aspect should be observed.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Brian. It's been
Thank you,
an
brother.
interesting chat.
Thank you very much, man,
Yeah,
for doing this.
please do continue.